It's moving. For 500 years, the eastern gate of Jerusalem has been sealed shut, bricked up, blocked. A massive stone wall where an entrance used to be. Muslims built a cemetery in front of it. Jews weren't allowed near it. Christians could only stare and wonder. But in the last few years, something's changing. Cracks appearing, stones shifting, and according to eyewitnesses on the ground, the gate is creaking. Now, before you dismiss this as conspiracy theory, understand what this represents. This isn't just any entrance. This is the gate facing the Mount of Olives, the one Ezekiel prophesied would stay shut until the Messiah returns. Ezekiel 44, 1-3, clear as day. This gate shall remain shut, it shall not be opened, and no one shall enter by it. For the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered by it. Therefore it shall remain shut. Shut until when? Until the Prince, the Messiah, returns. The prophecy has been physically true for 5 centuries. But now there are reports of structural damage, movement, preparation for something. Jewish rabbis are saying the Messiah's arrival is imminent. Christian prophecy scholars are pointing to this as a sign of the second coming. Even secular archaeologists are noting unusual activity around the gate. And here's what makes this absolutely explosive. Ancient Jewish tradition says that when the Messiah comes, he'll enter Jerusalem through this exact gate, not metaphorically, literally. He'll walk through the eastern gate, cross the Kidron Valley, and ascend the Temple Mount. So if the gate is opening, what does that mean? Subscribe right now, because what we're about to reveal connects ancient prophecy, modern geopolitics, and signs in Jerusalem that are impossible to ignore. The Eastern Gate, called the Golden Gate in Christian tradition, sits on the eastern wall of Jerusalem's Old City, directly facing the Mount of Olives. This positioning is prophetic. The gate dates back thousands of years. Solomon's temple had an eastern entrance. So did the Second Temple. Jewish tradition says the Shekinah glory, God's visible presence, would enter and exit through here. Ezekiel saw this in his vision. Chapter 43. Then he brought me to the gate facing east, and behold, the glory of the God of Israel was coming from the east, and the glory of the Lord entered the temple by the gate facing east. The eastern direction matters. The sun rises in the east. Light comes from the east. The Bible repeatedly associates the east with divine presence and messianic arrival. Fast forward to Jesus. Palm Sunday. He descended the Mount of Olives, crossed the Kidron Valley, and entered Jerusalem through the eastern gate, the same one Ezekiel described. After Jesus ascended from the Mount of Olives, angels told the disciples, "This Jesus, who was taken up from you into heaven, will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven." Same location, same direction. Now here's where prophecy becomes physical reality. In 1541, the Ottoman Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent ordered the eastern gate sealed, completely bricked up. Why? Islamic tradition claimed the Jewish Messiah would enter through that gate, so they sealed it to prevent his arrival. Then they built a Muslim cemetery directly in front. Islamic reasoning. The Jewish Messiah, being a priest, couldn't walk through a graveyard without becoming ceremonially unclean. Double insurance against messianic entry. Let's get specific about what Scripture actually says. Because this isn't vague symbolism. This is concrete prophecy about a physical gate. Ezekiel 44, 1-2. Then he brought me back to the outer gate of the sanctuary, which faces east, and it was shut. And the Lord said to me, "This gate shall remain shut. It shall not be opened, and no one shall enter by it. For the Lord, The God of Israel has entered by it. Therefore, it shall remain shut. Not might be shut, not symbolically shut, remain shut. Ezekiel wrote this around 593 BCE. The gate wasn't sealed then, but he prophesied it would be, and would stay that way until the divine prince returns. Zechariah 14:4. On that day, his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west by a very wide valley. The Messiah returns to the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem, directly across from the Eastern Gate. Acts 1:11-12. Angels speaking after Jesus' ascension. This Jesus, who was taken up from you into heaven, will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven. Then they returned to Jerusalem from the mount called Olivet. Same prophetic alignment. These aren't disconnected verses. They're describing one event, the Messiah's return through the eastern approach to Jerusalem, entering through the gate sealed since the 16th century. And now, in our generation, that gate is showing signs of opening. Coincidence or prophecy fulfilling before our eyes? June 1967. The Six-Day War. Israel facing annihilation from surrounding Arab armies. Outnumbered, outgunned. They should have lost. They dominated. In 6 days, Israel captured the Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, the West Bank, and most significantly, Jerusalem's Old City. For the first time in 2,000 years, Jerusalem was under Jewish control. Israeli paratroopers reached the Western Wall and wept. The chief rabbi blew the shofar, a moment of prophetic significance. But here's what most people miss. That war reset the prophetic clock. Jesus said in Luke 21:24, Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. For 2,000 years, Jerusalem was controlled by non-Jews, Romans, Byzantines, Muslims, Crusaders, Ottomans, British. The trampling was literal history. Then 1967 happened. The trampling ended, which means we entered a new prophetic era. And what happened to the Eastern Gate? Still sealed, still blocked. The one piece of prophetic puzzle remaining unchanged. Until now. Since 1967, Jerusalem has been in Jewish hands, but the Temple Mount and the Eastern Gate remained under Muslim administrative control. Israel won the war, but gave the Islamic Waqf authority over the Temple Mount to avoid religious conflict. This created a strange situation. Jews controlled Jerusalem, but couldn't access their holiest site. The Eastern Gate remained sealed. Prophecy unfulfilled. But tensions are rising. Politics are shifting, and the structure itself is deteriorating. Here's where this stops being ancient history and becomes current events. In recent years, multiple sources have reported structural problems, cracks in the sealed walls, stones becoming loose, ancient mortar deteriorating. Israeli archaeologists note that the 16th century Ottoman construction is failing. It's literally just stones and mortar blocking an ancient entrance. After 5 centuries, that seal is breaking down. Some eyewitnesses claim to have heard creaking sounds. Others report seeing stones shift during earthquakes. Jerusalem sits on a fault line. Seismic activity is common. And each earthquake puts stress on ancient structures. The Muslim Waqf, which administers the area, has done minimal maintenance. They don't want attention on the gate. They certainly don't want it opening. But nature doesn't care about politics. Jewish prophecy watchers monitor constantly. Some rabbis teach that the Messiah's arrival will be signaled by the gate opening, not by human hands, but through divine intervention or natural forces. Christian eschatology scholars point to this as potential fulfillment of Ezekiel's prophecy. The gate remained shut exactly as predicted, but if it opens, that signals the beginning of end times events. In 2019, reports surfaced of Israeli authorities surveying structural integrity. Why? Officially, to prevent collapse. Unofficially, speculation ranges from archaeological interest to messianic preparation. The cemetery in front remains, but it's old. Some graves date back to the 16th century. Islamic law about maintaining graveyards is complex, and as time passes, its function as a barrier becomes less clear. Jewish tradition is specific about how the Messiah will arrive. Not vague, not symbolic, specific. He will appear on the Mount of Olives, descend into the Kidron Valley, cross that valley and enter Jerusalem through the Eastern Gate, proceed directly to the Temple Mount and establish his kingdom. The Talmud discusses this. Medieval Jewish commentaries elaborate. Modern Orthodox rabbis teach it. This is mainstream Jewish messianic expectation, not fringe belief. But here's the problem they've wrestled with. The gate is sealed. So how does the Messiah enter? Some rabbis say he'll miraculously pass through the wall. Others say the gate will supernaturally open at his approach. Some suggest he'll command it open with a word. But increasingly, another interpretation gains traction. The gate will open naturally through structural failure or political change right before the Messiah arrives. The opening becomes a sign that his arrival is imminent. This explains the intense Jewish interest in its condition. Every crack, every shifted stone, every maintenance report gets analyzed for prophetic significance. The cemetery creates another theological puzzle. Jewish law says priests can't pass through graveyards without becoming unclean. The Messiah, according to tradition, will be from the priestly line. So how does he cross? Some rabbis argue he'll have supernatural immunity to ritual impurity. Others suggest the resurrection of the dead, a key messianic sign, will happen first, emptying the cemetery. Still others point to the fact that the Messiah transcends normal priestly restrictions. Christian interpretation adds another layer. Jesus walked through that gate during his earthly ministry. He'll walk through it again at his return. The sealed gate represents the time between his first and second coming. When it opens, that interval ends. You cannot discuss the Eastern Gate without discussing the Temple Mount. They're inseparable. The gate leads directly there, and the Temple Mount is the most contested religious site on earth. Jews call it the Temple Mount, site of Solomon's Temple and the Second Temple. Muslims call it Al-Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary, home to the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque. Three religions claim this space. Jews pray for temple rebuilding, Muslims control it and reject any Jewish religious presence. Christians watch both sides, knowing prophecy says a temple must exist before certain end times events occur. Current rules: Jews can visit but cannot pray there. Muslims pray freely. Israeli police enforce these restrictions to prevent riots. It's a powder keg. Now add the Eastern Gate to this equation. If it opens, who controls access? Who decides what happens? The Israeli government? The Muslim Waqf? International pressure? And here's the explosive part. Jewish groups are actively preparing for temple reconstruction. The Temple Institute in Jerusalem has recreated temple vessels, priestly garments, and architectural plans. They're training priests, breeding red heifers, a biblical requirement for temple purification. They're not waiting for permission. They're preparing for opportunity. And if the Eastern Gate opens, that could be the moment they've been waiting for. Muslim leaders understand this. They've publicly stated that any attempt to build a Jewish temple will be met with violent resistance. Palestinian leaders call it a red line. Regional powers have threatened war. So the Eastern Gate isn't just a religious symbol. It's a geopolitical flashpoint. Its opening could trigger events with global consequences. In 2022, something remarkable happened. 5 red heifers were transported from Texas to Israel. Why does this matter? Because a red heifer is required for the purification ritual that must happen before temple service can resume. Numbers 19 describes this in detail. A perfect red heifer, no blemishes, never worked, must be sacrificed and burned. Its ashes mixed with water create the purification solution. Without this, priests cannot serve in the temple. Without this, the temple cannot function. For 2,000 years, no red heifer existed that met biblical requirements. Modern cattle breeding made pure red coloring nearly impossible. Red cows would inevitably have white or black hairs, disqualifying them. Then genetic selection changed everything. Ranchers in Texas successfully bred heifers meeting biblical criteria. Jewish organizations verified them. And now, they're in Israel, being raised specifically for this purpose. As of 2024, these heifers are approaching the age of ritual eligibility. They must be at least 3 years old. They're being monitored constantly to ensure they remain unblemished. Temple Institute leaders have stated publicly, once these heifers are ready, they will perform the red heifer ceremony. They will produce the purification ashes. They will prepare for temple service to resume. But here's the connection to the Eastern Gate. Tradition says the red heifer ceremony takes place on the Mount of Olives, with the priest facing the Temple Mount through the Eastern Gate. The gate must be visible. Some interpretations suggest it must be open. Everything is aligning. The heifers exist. The priestly training is complete. The temple vessels are ready. The architectural plans are finished. All that's missing is access to the Temple Mount and an open Eastern Gate. Zechariah 14:4 describes a massive earthquake splitting the Mount of Olives when the Messiah returns. On that day, his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west by a very wide valley. This isn't symbolic language. It's describing geological catastrophe. The mountain literally splits apart, creating a valley running east to west. Now here's what scientists confirm. Jerusalem sits on a major fault line. The Dead Sea Transform Fault runs directly under the Mount of Olives. This fault is capable of producing massive earthquakes. And it's overdue. Geological surveys show the Mount of Olives has a natural fault line running east to west, exactly as Zechariah described 2,500 years ago. Before modern geology, before anyone understood plate tectonics, Zechariah prophesied the precise direction of a future earthquake rupture. Recent seismic activity in the region has increased. Small earthquakes rattle Jerusalem regularly. Each one could be a precursor to the big one. And if that major quake hits, it could easily damage or open the Eastern Gate. Some prophecy scholars suggest this is how the gate opens, not by human decision, not by political agreement, by earthquake, divine intervention through natural disaster. The cemetery in front of the gate, an earthquake could devastate it. The sealed walls, seismic stress could crack them open. All the human barriers to messianic entry could vanish in seconds. And according to Zechariah, that's exactly when the Messiah appears. His feet touch the Mount of Olives as it splits. He descends, crosses the valley, and enters Jerusalem through the Eastern Gate that has just been opened by divine earthquake. Natural disaster becomes prophetic fulfillment. The geopolitical situation surrounding Israel is more volatile now than at any time since 1967. Multiple fronts, multiple threats, multiple potential triggers for regional war. Iran is approaching nuclear capability. Hezbollah in Lebanon has 150,000 missiles aimed at Israel. Hamas in Gaza, despite recent conflicts, remains a threat. Syria is unstable. Regional powers are choosing sides. But there's another dimension: peace agreements. The Abraham Accords normalized relations between Israel and several Arab nations. More normalization deals are being negotiated. Saudi Arabia might recognize Israel soon. Why does this matter? Because Daniel 9:27 prophecies about a covenant or peace agreement connected to end times events. And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. Many prophecy scholars see modern peace treaties as potential fulfillments or precursors to this prophecy. Each agreement brings Israel closer to the regional acceptance that could allow temple reconstruction. But there's a flip side. Every peace treaty enrages hardliners. Every normalization deal creates new enemies. The more peace agreements Israel signs, the more certain groups feel threatened and desperate. This creates explosive conditions. A major war could erupt, and major wars reshape geography, politics, and religious access. The 1967 war gave Israel Jerusalem. What could the next war give them? Perhaps access to the Temple Mount. Perhaps removal of the Muslim cemetery. Perhaps political justification for opening the Eastern Gate. War has always been God's tool for prophetic fulfillment, and the stage is set. Biblical prophecy is precise about timing. Feast days matter, seasons matter. God operates on a calendar. Jesus fulfilled spring feasts at his first coming. Passover, the crucifixion, unleavened bread, the burial, first fruits, the resurrection. Pentecost, the Holy Spirit's arrival. The fall feasts remain unfulfilled. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. Prophecy scholars believe Jesus' return will fulfill these feasts just as precisely as his first coming fulfilled the spring ones. Rosh Hashanah, the Feast of Trumpets. Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement. Sukkot, Feast of Tabernacles. All three connect to return, judgment, and divine dwelling. Recent years have seen remarkable alignments. Blood moon tetrads, 4 consecutive total lunar eclipses on Jewish feast days, occurred in 2014 to 2015. Historically, blood moon tetrads coincided with major events in Jewish history. Solar eclipses crossing America in 2017 and 2024 formed an X over the United States, a nation with deep ties to Israel's security. Prophetic significance? Many think so. Jewish sages teach that major prophetic fulfillments occur during feast seasons. The Messiah's arrival would align with the biblical calendar, not random Tuesday afternoon, a feast day, a holy season. So monitors watch every fall feast season. Every Rosh Hashanah could be the Rosh Hashanah. Every Yom Kippur could mark the Messiah's return. And if the Eastern Gate shows signs of opening during a feast season, that would be considered highly significant. So where does this leave us? The Eastern Gate has been sealed for 500 years, exactly as Ezekiel prophesied. But now it's deteriorating, cracks appearing, stones shifting, reports of movement. Red heifers exist for the first time in 2,000 years. Temple preparations are complete. Jewish groups are ready to resume sacrifices the moment they have access. Jerusalem is under Jewish control for the first time since 70 AD. The trampling of the Gentiles has ended. Prophecy clock is ticking. Geopolitical tensions are at breaking point. Peace treaties and war threats exist simultaneously. The Middle East is a powder keg. Seismic activity threatens the Mount of Olives. The exact earthquake Zechariah predicted is geologically possible and overdue. Every element is in place. The stage is set. The actors are ready. All that's missing is the opening act. And that opening act might be a gate creaking open after 500 years of silence. Is this coincidence? Or is this the generation that will see prophecy fulfilled? The generation that won't just read about the Messiah's return, but witness it? Jesus warned, "Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour." We can't predict the exact timing, but we can watch the signs, and every sign is flashing red. The sealed gate is moving. The question isn't whether prophecy will be fulfilled, it will be. The question is, are we watching it happen right now? Subscribe to this channel for continued updates on Jerusalem, prophecy, and signs of the end times. Share this video with everyone who needs to understand what's happening in Israel right now. Hit that like button if you believe we're living in prophetic times. The gate has been sealed for 500 years. It's starting to open. The only question is, are you ready for what comes next?